Welcome back to the Blockchain Foundations course. My name is Gerard Daché. I'm the Executive Director of the Government Blockchain Association. In this module, we're going to talk about an intro to blockchain and cryptocurrencies. So when I teach this class live, I generally ask people, why are you attending this class? And the response that I generally get is people are interested in getting a job in this space. They're interested in business opportunities. So I'd like to just sort of like to kind of define a little bit about that. We have seen huge increase in spending on blockchain, right? According to the CNBC, blockchain startup funding grew by over 700% in 2021. We've been teaching this course since about 2017, so we've been updating it periodically, but these are trends that we've seen actually for a couple of years. Driven by mega rounds in terms of investment, over $100 million plus, we've seen an increase in over 60% of total investments in startups. Global spending is also on the rise. Worldwide spending on blockchain solutions from 2017 to 2024 is expected to top over $19 billion by 2024. It's grown about 1,900% from 2017 to its anticipated level in 2024. So we're seeing spending continue to go into blockchain solutions. And some places more so than others. In China, tech industry is supported by $616 billion in research and development resources. China's digital commerce firms have over $2.1 billion in capital as of June 30th of 2020. And fintech firms in China have closed $39 billion in total funding so far by July of 2020. So we're seeing just large amounts of capital going into blockchain. We're also seeing a huge increase in blockchain jobs. So in 2021, blockchain jobs surged by 400%, according to LinkedIn. The salaries, right, the compensation is growing. So the average developer salary at the time was $98,949 in the United States. The average blockchain developer salary is $108,407 in the United States. So there is a shortage of blockchain developers. More and more people are pouring money into it, and there is an increasing demand for blockchain developers. And so why is this? It's important for business, and the property that makes blockchain important for business is really five properties. It's immutability. So one of the things in almost every industry that we're seeing is that people need to trust the data. Right, and there's so much concern about fraud and corruption, and we'll talk more about all of this later in terms of what was a driver in blockchain. But people want data that they can trust, that they know for sure hasn't been tampered with. They also want transparency. They want to be able to see what's happening. If you're talking about like a supply chain or any kind of record of transactions, people want to know what happened in the past. They're also looking for better efficiency. Now, blockchain is not highly efficient in every scenario, but in the scenarios where it is, it's extremely efficient. So people are always looking for ways to find more efficient technologies. And then along with the transparency, traceability is another thing that's very important, especially in light of COVID and some of the other things that we've had to deal with. People want to know where things came from, whether it's the safety of food or pharmaceuticals, whether we're talking about slave labor or any of these things. Traceability has become very, very important to business. And then security. As we move more and more into a digital world, the threats and the attacks on the security of our systems continue to increase. Governments are spending more and more money for security. It represents a huge percentage of IT spending. And blockchain provides all of these things. And just to give you an example of some of the industries where blockchain impacts, it's important to understand that any industry where you have a transaction between untrusted parties, blockchain plays a role. So we've identified a couple here, but there's many, many more, right? But supply chain, one of the things that's really important in a supply chain is the number of parties that have to interact together, have to coordinate together to move a product from point A to point B across many different jurisdictions, across different controls. The amount of money that has to change hands and agreements that have to be made. Finance. Most people realize that blockchain and Bitcoin have something to do with each other. We'll talk about Bitcoin as the killer app, but it really started in finance, and there's just so many applications. Healthcare. Healthcare is one of those areas where we see a huge potential for blockchain, and it's just really emerging. We'll talk later about how blockchain applies to all of the transactions in the healthcare ecosystem. And so there's many of them. It's everything from insurance to clinical trials to providing care, administrative costs, even medical transportation. I mean, there's so many different places where pharmaceutical companies, medical device companies, healthcare providers, insurance companies, they're all involved in transactions. And so this is, and there's a lot of fraud. Because there's so much money in that space, there's also a lot of fraud. Retail is another huge opportunity for blockchain. Again, lots of parties working together. And then government. Everything from voting to lotteries to licensing and permitting. We'll talk about many of these different things. But blockchain is important literally to every industry because of these properties, and really in any place where there's a transaction between untrusted parties. So towards that end, we've seen global adoption really explode. We completed a report not too long ago called The Impact of Cryptocurrency Adoption on Government. And we wanted to look at the size, trajectory, and velocity of the blockchain and cryptocurrency ecosystem. So one of the things that we looked at was the number of wallet downloads. And many different blockchains have all kinds of different tokens. Many of them have wallets you would need to use to interact. And so as we've been tracking the number of wallet downloads from a variety of different sources, we see that they've just exploded. It's really impacted every industry, every country, every state, every province. Now, let's look back in history. If we look at the internet as an example, email was really the killer app, right? When somebody wanted email, they'd have to get an ISP, right, an internet service provider. And once they had an internet service provider, they could then go to the web. And once they could go to the web, they could buy books online. They could download forms. They could even date. But the thing that really enabled all of that was email. People wanted access to email, which opened the door. Well, in the cryptocurrency space, or in the blockchain space, cryptocurrency, and initially Bitcoin, was the killer app as email was for the internet. And so if you think about it, Gmail is a particular type of email, and email is a particular type of use for the internet. Bitcoin is a particular type of cryptocurrency, but blockchain can be used for a lot of things besides cryptocurrency, just like the internet can be used for a lot of things besides email. Email is essentially the use for the technology, as Bitcoin and cryptocurrency is a particular use for blockchain. So we've seen the crypto market just explode to $2 trillion in about 5 years. We've seen wallet downloads continue to explode. And now more money is pouring into a whole new different area called decentralized finance. The banks don't need it. So the reason why we're seeing so much money go into DeFi is because there's a demand, there's a pull, there's a set of requirements for capital to go into DeFi. And the reason is this: the government has generally reduced the reserve requirements for banks down to zero or practically zero. And that means the banks don't need your deposits in order to make loans. But the cryptocurrency exchanges do. So the cryptocurrency exchanges are offering very, very high interest. It's called staking fees, yields, return on investment. So lots and lots of money is being poured into the decentralized finance space, simply because they need your money more so than the banks do, and they're willing to pay much higher returns. So we're seeing a huge explosion, like a runaway train, going into the decentralized finance space. And it's important to understand that cryptocurrency growth is really growing globally. Now, this is a report that comes off a Statista, a website. What I would encourage you to do is don't be so concerned specifically about the numbers, right? The sample size on this particular report was relatively small. So I wouldn't be overly concerned about the specific numbers, but I would look at the distribution. And what you'll see is that blockchain and cryptocurrency use is really expanding globally. It's not just in one country or in industrialized countries or poor countries. It really is a global phenomenon. In fact, it's so global that if you look at the market cap of cryptocurrency, the market cap of cryptocurrency is literally larger than the national gross domestic products of all of these countries. And just so in just a few years, it went from being an idea to having a market cap greater than all of these countries. So it's a pretty astounding growth. Now, let's talk a little bit about why some of that is. This chart right here is called the M1 money supply. And what it indicates is, in the 1970s, the United States got off the gold standard, which means we no longer had to have gold reserves in order to make money available. And what you see is, starting in the 1970s, the supply of money gradually increased, because as fiat currency goes, we could essentially print as much as we wanted, and we did. And we had certain rules about how we would do that. The slope stays fairly constant until about 2008. And in 2008, we had the global financial crisis. We did something called quantitative easing, which basically means that we printed money to pay debt. And at that point, you notice the slope of the line changes all the way until we get to March of 2020. And in March of 2020, there's this little bug going around. You probably heard about it, called COVID. And we basically shut down the economy. We sent everybody home. But we said, listen, you still have to eat. You still have to pay your bills. So we decided to send everybody some money. No, we didn't. It's not like we had piles of cash, sitting in some corner all, in bags. Basically, what we had to do is we had to, for all intents and purposes, print money. And in 1 year, we started the year in March of 2020, we had a $4 trillion economy. And within 1 year, we created 14 trillion new dollars. So we went from $4 trillion to $18 trillion in a single year. And so when that happens, right, we explode the supply of money. It's chasing fewer goods, because in most cases it's not like we were expanding production. In fact, in a lot of cases we were cutting production because people were at home, and literally we set the table for massive inflation. Now, in addition to that, we went further and further into debt. So this right here is the U.S. debt. So in 2020, the U.S. national debt grew from 23 trillion to 27 trillion in just 1 year. Really fascinating to look at. These numbers are specifically from 2013 to December of 2016. And I'm going to put this in context. But if you look at, I guess it's around the December timeframe, December of 23, December of 2013. We saw a massive explosion in the value of cryptocurrency. Massive explosion. And then what happened? It took a huge dip, and then it went back up, and it literally took us 2 years to get the market cap of cryptocurrency back to where it was in November, December of 2013, right? So, and I remember when this happened, people were talking about, well, Bitcoin and cryptocurrency is dead. Look at this drop. As it dropped for the longest period of time, and then came back up, really, nobody was taking this seriously, right? A few people were, but very, very few people were. Well, that blip that we just looked at essentially was right here, where it says, where did it go? And look what's happened to the value since then. And what we've seen is very similar patterns, right? It grows very rapidly. It's flat for a long time, and then it grows very rapidly, and then it drops, and it continues to drop, and then it takes it about 2 years to get back up to where it was, right? And then we see it drop, right? In this case, it had a little rebound. It drops, and so more than likely, it'll take some time for it to go up, but when it goes up, it generally goes up much higher than it did before. But it takes it some time. Now, because the dollar is diminishing in value, the dollar is a global reserve, and it's diminishing in value because of creation of new money and a variety of other things. We see this massive influx into cryptocurrency, and let me give you an example. So what you're looking at in real time is a variety of cryptocurrencies, valued dollars, right, economic treasure, essentially moving from the fiat system into the cryptocurrency system in real time. And so these are essentially people using US dollars to buy cryptocurrency. Now, one of the things that's interesting about when that happens is many of these cryptocurrencies are not on regulated exchanges. And so when this happens, the economic activity tends to fall outside of the view of regulators. This isn't true. This isn't true for all cryptocurrencies, but and some cryptocurrencies are within the view of government regulators if they're being traded on a regulated exchange, or they may not be if they're done peer-to-peer. But this does represent, in real time, a change in our systems, our processes, our paradigms on how we use and view money and the economy. When you're dealing with dollars and banks, right, we have an entire structure, we have an entire set of laws, we have an entire set of tools that governments can use to influence, monitor, and control. When economic value moves into these different tokens, we don't necessarily have the same kind of mature interaction between the government and the economic ecosystem. So this is it's very meaningful. And one of the things government's going to have to figure out is how do they interact in this new world when the government's not in control of this money, right? Who mints the money, where they store it, how they value it. All of those things are in many cases very unlike the way the government essentially establishes money, fiat money. So there's a lot of things that we're going to have to figure out over the next couple of years. Now, here's something that's fascinating. If you Google U.S. debt clock, one of the things that's fascinating about this shows the actual national debt per citizen, per taxpayer. It shows the information at the federal level, the state level. There's a lot of information here. But one of the things that's really fascinating is right down here in the bottom right corner. It's the dollar to crypto ratio now. So today, there's $20.94, right, for every 1 unit of cryptocurrency. But in 2013, there was $9,738 to every $1 of cryptocurrency. So the value of cryptocurrency has gone from 9,738 to 1 to 20.94 to 1, which represents just a huge increase in value. So the government is taking the adoption of cryptocurrency very seriously. If you look at the IRS Form 1040, I think the first question now that they ask after they ask your name and your address is have you acquired, owned, or disposed of any cryptocurrency in that tax year? It's like one of the very first questions they ask. Countries around the world are starting to declare cryptocurrency or Bitcoin as legal tender. El Salvador just did it for a variety of reasons. One of them was that there's so much money being paid in remittance payments that they felt that using cryptocurrency would be better for the people of their country. The IMF and the World Bank have issued warnings, so it's not just one country has done it. Now the entire global financial system is basically making statements about this. So governments are worried about this. The blockchain infrastructure has been under attack, and I don't mean to be hyperbolic about it, but infrastructure bill in the U.S. government, I think last year it was in 2021, basically made illegal a lot of things that are sort of part of the normal part of blockchain and cryptocurrency infrastructures that it's very difficult to deal with. What I mean by that is they put requirements that almost can't be complied with. So again, from the legal side, the regulatory standpoint, there's a lot of figuring out that's going to have to get done over the next couple of years about how to make this all work. Yeah, the next module will be on a brief history of blockchain. So we'll see you at the next module.